When I started, I couldn't run a single mile. Don't even think of yourself as a runner. Think of yourself as an athlete that specializes in running. We need to do other things. We need to jump. We need to lift. We need to sprint. And we need to run a lot. You start doing things that you never thought you could do. And then all of a sudden, you're not even really fazed by it.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course, with insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe Sena, CEO and founder of Spartan and host of the Hard Way podcast. I got my buddy Jason on here. He is a hard way runner. He takes the hard way every day. 2:39 marathon?
Yeah, that was my PR. Yes, sir.
Pretty damn good. USA track and field coach, running coach.
Yeah, I got the coaching certification from USA Track and Field. They're the governing body of the sport, so I figured they were a good authority to get your coaching certification from.
How the hell does somebody run a 2:39? Like, let's say somebody listening to this. I know there's a lot of Spartans that would love to run a 2:39. I mean, is it possible? Like, if you're not born with that structure, that body structure, that fitness, like, is it even possible to go from a 4-hour to a 2:39?
I don't want to say that anybody could do it because, look, there are going to be some people who are not going to be able to average 6:05 a mile for 26.2 miles. But I did it because I did it after 13 years of being a runner. And when I started, I couldn't run a single mile at that marathon race pace that I ended up running. For me, it was, let me try to run a fast mile first. Let me just focus on running cross country and track and field as a high school kid. And then I did the same thing as a college athlete, ran another 4 years of cross country and track in that kind of a venue. You kind of take small bites of the apple over the years and you gradually get better and better and better. And the marathon, I think is a very difficult type of race. It requires a lot of aerobic development. And if you're 1 to 2 years into the start of your running journey, I think you're better off training for a shorter race, focusing more on speed, on power, and then you can layer on the endurance as your training age improves as you get older and after you've built some of the foundation first. So the marathon is like the cherry on top. Let's make sure you can race a good mile or a 5K first.
No, that makes sense. And I would say add some obstacles, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's very on brand of you, Joe. And I agree. I think it's great. Running is admittedly a pretty two-dimensional sport. So I love to see when runners improve their athleticism too. Let's do a Spartan race. Let's do high rocks. Let's do other things so that we're not just focusing on our running, we're also getting stronger. We're building athleticism and coordination because those things are going to help you ultimately race faster too.
Yeah, I did a lot of ultras in my day, a lot of marathons, I still run every day. I knock out just shy of 4 miles every day. And it's boring.
A little bit, I'll be the first one to say that running isn't for everyone. I'm not here to convince people to go become a runner. I have found personally that it's a very meditative process for me. I just like the way I feel after I go running. And I really appreciate kind of the mental and psychological benefits of a good dose of aerobic exercise. But yeah, you're right. It can be boring. I grew up on a team, and I don't think I would have stuck with it if I wasn't just running through the woods most days, making jokes with my friends.
When you add the dimension of trail or obstacle or community, it becomes a little more interesting. And the other thing I'd say, let's talk a little bit about body type. Those runners that, like, my boys wrestle, my girls play soccer, and there's some wrestlers on the team, including my son, that needs to keep their weight down, so they run a lot. And so it really does peel the weight off, but it peels the muscle off as well. You agree with that?
I think it can if you're not careful. I think minute for minute running is one of the highest calorie burning types of exercise that you can do. There've been studies on different sports and how many calories they burn per hour. Running burns a tremendous number of calories. And so you are going to lose some weight if you start running and start running consistently. You will lose muscle if you stop strength training if you're not getting enough protein, and if you're really kind of not taking care of your body. While running is great for weight loss, it shouldn't be atrophying your muscles to any kind of substantial level. If that's happening, there's a problem with the training itself, and we should probably address that.
Well, I mean, if you tell me what you think, but from my daily routine, I get into like 3-year bits. And for 3 years, 300 burpees a day, for 3 years, carrying around a kettlebell everywhere I went. My latest is this 3-year Murph. And I'm doing the push-ups and the lunges. I replace lunges. I replace the squats with lunges and pull-ups. And so if you're doing that and you're not just running, you got a shot at maintaining, somewhat of a body.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think it's interesting if you look at the training of college cross country or track athletes, you look at the training of even elite level marathoners, they do a fair amount of strength training. Now, they're going to look pretty skinny, pretty thin, because they're not training for hypertrophy. They're not training to get bigger muscles in the gym. They're really working on, their power to weight ratio. These guys are really going to surprise a lot of more bulky CrossFit power lifter type folks, because they're going to get in the weight room and actually be able to put up some decent weight compared with their body size. But you're right, they're not really focusing on hypertrophy, so they're going to, look like your stereotypical distance runner, but they are probably going to surprise a lot of people with the amount of work they can do in the gym and the lower body, squats and deadlifts, the absolute weight that they can lift, just because, if you're let's say you're a 4-minute miler, that's a lot of strength required to run a mile that fast. And while it's not exactly the same, there certainly is carryover to the weight room. You are going to have a good amount of strength simply by being fast.
What are your thoughts on flexibility?
Overrated for runners. Running we're sort of like springs, right? Like every step that you take when you're running a race, you sort of want to think of your legs as almost being like little pogo sticks. You want to be able to absorb a lot of the force of your stride, hold on to it through that isometric contraction, and then release that energy sort of as free energy through, the stretch reflex. Achilles tendon does a lot of work in that regard. And so you want to be stiff in the right ways. Now, you want to have proper range of motion. You're going to be able to, go through the normal running range of motion, especially when you're running really fast, which is obviously a wider range of motion. But, runners aren't gymnasts. We don't need to be able to do a split. We don't need to be doing all kinds of gymnastics oriented type of stuff. But again, I think it's helpful to be a well-rounded athlete. It's funny. I like to tell runners, don't even think of yourself as a runner. Think of yourself as an athlete that specializes in running. So just because most of your training is running, that doesn't mean we're not going to do dynamic flexibility exercises. That doesn't mean we're going to do a lot of mobility work. Doesn't mean we're not going to get in the gym and lift some relatively heavy weight. So we're going to do a lot of things that are going to make us these more well-rounded athletes. But the majority of what we're going to do is the distance running.
We had early days at Spartan 2011. We had this athlete. He's definitely the GOAT as far as the male segment of our athletes goes, Hobie Call. And his dream was to run a sub-2-hour marathon. And his body type was perfect. He was incredibly fit, incredible runner. You could look him up. He won 15 or 16 of our events in a row when we first started this business. He didn't just run. He carried rocks. He did enormous amounts of lunges. He had a whole, unorthodox routine, and it helped him run faster. The other thing he said I thought was really interesting. Tell me what you think of this. He said, one day I realized my body wanted to slow down during my run, and that's what I'd normally do. That's what most human beings would do. But I thought, why don't I speed up? Why don't I just give it something different? I guess comment on the two, which is this unorthodox training for somebody that runs at that level. And then two is that mindset of your mind might just want something different in the middle of that moment where you want to pack it in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Let me start with that one first. I think it's not always easier to run slower. Sometimes it's easier to pick up the pace. And I think anybody who has been in a race situation where you start feeling tired, you start feeling sluggish, negative voice on your shoulder starts telling you, hey, you should slow down, man. You don't have what it takes. It doesn't always behoove you to slow down. Sometimes, like, it's just going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable no matter what. Let's get the most out of ourselves and try speeding up. Now, of course, sometimes when you're doing an easy run or you have a recovery effort, it's a good idea to actually err on the conservative side. But when you're running a workout or you're doing something where speed matters, it's often, kind of almost the same effort just to go a little bit faster. What your body is capable of is very different than what your mind often thinks your body is capable of. So every negative voice that comes in your head telling you to slow down or stop, you have so much more left in the tank that you can almost ignore your brain for a good chunk of that effort and just keep pushing forward. I think the unconventional training is almost maybe a little bit conventional, for Spartan. Like, he was doing all these different things that, you might look at a marathoner and say, you don't really need to do all that stuff. But at the same time, you said he won, what, 15 or 16 national Spartan titles. So it's undeniable that he is an incredibly talented athlete and that his training was really good at the time. It got him on the podium on that top spot so many times. I would say he was doing the training that he needed to do to be good at Spartan races. So maybe it wasn't unconventional. Maybe it was just unconventional at the time. But I think more runners need to think a little bit more like that. Like, again, we're not runners, we're athletes. We need to do other things. We need to jump, we need to lift, we need to sprint, and we need to run a lot.
I was reading an old study recently, or at least surface reading an old study recently. And the human body is so amazing in that it will adjust how many calories it burns doing. In other words, if you're doing the same exact exercise as me, but we eat differently, we will adjust accordingly so that we don't become emaciated. And the same thing happens if we do the same routine every single day. The body adapts that, which is why we've learned as a species to mix things up. Do you think runners fall into that trap of just the same thing over and over and need a little variety?
100%. It's funny, Joe. I've been a running coach since 2010. One of the things that I do is I write custom race plans for runners. And so I have looked at the training history of thousands of runners over the last 14 years or so. They're all sort of doing the same thing. And, coming from my track and cross country background, I sort of want to take many of the principles of collegiate training and apply them to your adult recreational runner. And what I see in the training of, most people who are running marathons and half marathons, most people on the starting line of these big races, they're all sort of doing the same thing. They're all running about 30 miles a week. They're all running about a 10-mile long run. They're either running no fast workouts or sporadic fast workouts that, in my mind, don't really have any sort of logical progression. And they're not really doing much strength training. So they're kind of just running, 4 or 5 miles most days. And that is fine for a general health perspective. But I'm a running coach. My job is to help people get better at the sport of running. And we need that variety. I don't really buy into the whole muscle confusion. Let's do a different thing every day. That's obviously not going to get you to your goal because you need some form of progression. But, we need enough variety where we're not doing the same thing every day, because if we're doing the same thing every day, we're not stressing our bodies, we're not challenging our bodies and our minds. And that's not going to help us achieve new levels of fitness, because after all, if we want to run, a faster marathon, you're asking to do something that you've never done before. And before you can do something you've never done before in a race, you probably have to do something you've never done before in a training situation first. Maybe that's more miles per month. Maybe that's more speed work. Maybe that's just more consistent speed work. Maybe that's adding in strength training so that you're not getting hurt as frequently. Maybe it's recognizing that you should probably stop running 2 or 3 marathons every year and instead work on getting your 5K time down, because your VO2 max isn't as high as it could be. Your power and economy isn't as high as it could be. So there's so many things that we could work on as runners, not to mention, some of the, more athletic oriented things like, hey, instead of spending the next 2 months just jogging around a couple times a week. Can we train for a Spartan race? Unlock a new level of fitness or a new physical skill set. And then you can apply that to your running when you get back into more formal run training. Yeah, I'm very much on board with the idea that yes, we need progression, but we also need different stimuli at different times to drive forward different aspects of our physiology. Yeah, training for a marathon is great for your endurance, but sometimes we need to train for the mile and really drive up that VO2 max. And then sometimes maybe we're just going to do base training and do a ton of strength training so that we're really getting stronger. We're working on our power, our explosivity. There's value in those physical skills too.
I'm going to say something that might be like so obvious to you because you're doing this for a living. All my training was unconventional because I just didn't know any better. My mom was into this in the 70s. She was introduced to yoga, meditation, became a vegan through an old yogi in a health food store in the 1970s in Queens. It was a random thing. This yogi believed in long distance running. He started a race called the Transcendence Run, 3,100 miles around a 1 mile loop in Queens, New York. So I was around running culture for a long time, but I didn't have any sort of pamphlet or guidance on how to train. And I just picked up stuff that worked and I discarded stuff that didn't. For me, what I found was something I call time on legs. And so I knew on a Saturday I had to have time on legs. It could be on my bike. It could be hiking with weight. It could be running. But I needed some serious time on my legs. I was always training for 50s or 100s or even 350. And so it didn't matter what I found. And again, you could push back on this, but this is my experience. It didn't matter what I did as long as I had the hours in and as long as I was depleted of glycogen early on. This is going to sound crazy. And my body had to like tap into fat storage and just mentally tough through it, that I got tremendous benefit and then saw success in the actual event. Any of that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially the part about just you understanding that you need at least, probably about once a week, a big aerobic stimulus. Like, yeah, sometimes it's going to be a run, sometimes it might be a ruck, sometimes it might be a bike ride or something along those lines. Getting in that at least 90-minute, but preferably 2 hours, maybe 2.5 or 3 hours of consistent aerobic stimulus.
They were 10 to
10?
12, 10 to
10 to
12 hours.
12 hours. Yeah, I mean, Joe, you are definitely a whole different breed, but things change when you're training for ultra marathons. If you're training for a 100-mile ultra marathon, you're going to need a longer effort than simply 2.5 hours. Sometimes you're going to go for those really long efforts. But that is the cornerstone of a lot of really good running programs. Now, I do think specificity matters a little bit. Like if you want to run a fast marathon, we should try to do your long aerobic efforts as runs rather than on the elliptical. It's probably just going to make you into a better runner. It's the specific activity that you're going to be doing on race day. So there's going to be more benefit to you practicing that. But in general, getting in that long aerobic benefit is one of the most important things that you can do in your training. And I also have a hunch that it probably led to a lot of longevity in the sport, in running, for you to switch it up every once in a while, for you to go for a ruck for 8 hours rather than a 4-hour run, or for you to go swimming or anything that you might have been doing elsewhere. This is giving you that exposure to other movement patterns, of developing aerobic fitness in different ways that I think is more sustainable in the long run. And it probably just made it more fun for you, right? Like you said earlier, running could be a little boring. Sometimes you got to switch it up. That's why I love trail running. That time just seems to fly by more and more. I think we could really do a lot to elevate the whole sport of running just by getting runners into a good long run pretty much every week. If you did a good long run pretty much every week, I'm not saying every week, I'm not saying every 3 weeks, but most weeks, you're going to find that your endurance is getting a lot better. It's going to allow you to build a lot of tissue tolerance so that you can handle more frequent running. You can handle those harder, faster workouts as well, because you're just developing that resilience, not just in your body, but I think also in your mind. And you're probably a really good example, Joe, of someone who's built a lot of mental tenacity and toughness just through gritting it out over a very long period of time.
Yeah, and what I found, for those listening, what I found was that long day, whether it's a swim, a bike, a rock, a run, very long day didn't have to be super fast, had to be painful though. I had to suffer, had to be hungry and tired. When I woke up on Sunday morning, it would be 5 weeks into it, and I felt like I could do it again. I was ready for anything. The first week it was like, oh, I got to sleep in on Sunday. I'm broken. The second week I felt a little better, but it could be 5, 6 weeks in. All of a sudden you wake up on that Sunday, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go do it again.
Yeah, isn't that intoxicating?
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
I love it. I mean, that's what made me fall in love with the sport of running is that you start doing things that you never thought you could do. And then all of a sudden, you're not even really phased by it. I sort of remember my first sub 6 minute mile. And I was like, oh my God, it was just incredible. Like my brain exploded. And the next thing you know, it's like, that's every day. I could run a sub 6 minute mile every day. And it's just not a big thing. And so it really allows you to, yeah, of course, you get into a new level of fitness. That's fun. But I think the more exciting part of all this is the fact that you start thinking that you can do almost anything and you can conquer anything, you can get anything done because if you can go for a 10-hour run when you're hungry, then why can't you start that business? Why can't you train for an Ironman? Why can't you do all these things that a lot of people think might be too difficult or impossible? But when you can prove to yourself that you can do something you previously thought was impossible, the world just opens up for you and you can really take advantage of that.
No doubt about it. You and I are 100% aligned. So there's probably 250 million Americans, 6 billion others around the world that are stuck on a couch somewhere. Don't want to do this. Why would I go running? I'm not a runner. I'm overweight. I'm not in shape. Give me 2 or 3 things that you'd say to them to get going, because this is my whole life, my whole purpose. Our purpose is to get people moving. What do you say?
I would say I would first admit that it's going to feel hard for a month or two. Running is a pretty difficult sport or form of exercise to get consistent with, especially if you don't have a background in like a running related sport. If you're coming from soccer, it's going to be easier for you. But if you don't come from a running based sport, you're not an athlete, let's just be honest, it's going to be difficult for a month or two. So let's not pretend it's going to be easy. Let's not going to pretend it's going to be all unicorns and rainbows. And then when it feels hard, you just want to quit. It's going to be hard. But what I can tell a new runner or someone thinking about getting into running is that you are soon going to start to feel like running is a little bit effortless. Not all runs, probably about a half of your runs are going to feel hard. But after a month or two, things are going to start to click and it's not going to be super challenging anymore. You're going to feel better after a run than you do before a run. And that's the key right there. I want runners to feel what it's like after a run when they feel better than before they started. Now, it's going to take 4 to 8 weeks to get there, but I promise you, you will get there. And it's at that moment that you will understand why people continue to run. Oh, this makes me feel really good. It's not, I'm not trying to lose weight. I'm not trying to run a 6 minute mile. I'm just trying to feel good. And when you experience that, it's going to be easier for you to be consistent with running. You're going to start getting curious. Oh, maybe I could run a 10K. Oh, maybe I could run 5K faster than I did last week. And then again, just like, some of these big efforts open up the world of opportunity for you, you're going to start opening up your own personal world of opportunity for your own running. Can I run a 10K? Can I run it faster? Can I go run longer? Can I do other things with my fitness now that I've built it for a little while? So I would just tell runners to be patient, like it's a long-term sport, sort of like if someone really wants to get into powerlifting, look, you're not going to pull 500 pounds off the floor the first time you deadlift. This is a multi-year journey. And as long as you want to go on that journey, you think you might like to achieve that outcome. As long as you're kind of having fun along the way, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
I believe all of us are running from pain and running towards pleasure. Away from pain, towards pleasure. And I think you nailed it what you just said was, I don't want to do those runs for those 4, 5, 6 weeks because I'm running from pain and there's nothing pleasurable about it. And then one day, the pain becomes pleasure. The run actually provides this unbelievable feeling like you just described. And then when you flip that, your whole life changes.
Yeah. There have been a couple times in my running career. Now, look, I've been running for like 26 years, and I can really count on maybe two hands, but no more than that. The number of times where I've been in a race trying to run as hard as I can, and all of a sudden it just feels effortless and it clicks. And it's like, I want runners to feel like that on an easy run. You're going to have to run for like a quarter century to feel like this in a race situation, but it's magic. When the harder you push, yeah, you're feeling uncomfortable. You're feeling that discomfort and pain, but you enjoy it. You want more of it because the harder you push, the more discomfort you feel, the more you know that you're doing the right thing. Like, I'm running faster. I'm going to run a personal best. This is what racing should feel like. And it's just a magical feeling that you can put yourself in a situation to do something with your body that's incredible, that makes you feel good, that is an expression of a high level of fitness. I can just think of nothing more exciting than that.
Now we're on the same page. How do people find you?
Well, strengthrunning.com is my home base. That's where you can find the Strength Running blog. We have tons of articles on a lot of the different things we talked about. But if you're into podcasts, check out the Strength Running podcast. We're typically a top 3 running podcast in the US. And I interview world-class experts, the people that might surround a pro runner, the psychologists and the nutritionists and the strength coaches and running coaches and the team around that elite athlete who might help them get to that elite level of performance. I want to treat every runner just like that. So I try to bring on those kinds of subject matter experts to help runners improve their training in a whole variety of different ways.
I love it. Thanks for coming on. I'd like you to invite all your runners, the expanded community, to come out and taste a Spartan or a Tough Mudder on us, no charge. You collect all the emails, whether you get one person or 1,000, it's on us. And who knows, maybe it excites somebody or a cousin or a friend of that runner, right? You just don't know. But if we wake some people up, it's a win.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joe.